Okay, bore da a croeso cynnes I bawb, good morning and a very warm welcome to everybody to the meeting of the Voluntary Sector Liaison Committee, which we're holding via Teams today, Thursday, the 17th of March 2022. As we just stated, the meeting will be recorded and will be able to be viewed via the Council's website, except for any discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and the audio of those individuals present and speaking during the meeting will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. If we could then turn to the first item on the agenda, which is to receive apologies for absence. And if I could ask the committee clerk to confirm any apologies that have been received.
Thank you. We've received apologies from Councillor Stenner, Councillor Williams, South Wales Fire and Rescue Services, Natural Resources Wales, Home Start Cymru, and SSAFA Gwent branch.
Thank you. And just to confirm, are there any other apologies for absence that have been received? No? Okay. And if I could ask the committee clerk also to carry out a roll call for attendance, please.
Thank you. When I call your name or organisation, please can you turn on your microphone and indicate that you are present. Councillor Aldworth.
Present.
Councillor Bevan. Councillor Collis.
Present.
Councillor Cook. Councillor Etheridge.
Present.
Councillor Fussell. Councillor Goff. Councillor Haas. Councillor Higgs. Councillor Parry. Councillor Price. And Councillor Whittle.
Present too.
Thank you. Representatives of Garvo, Stephen Tiley.
Present.
Alison Palmer.
Yes, I'm here.
And Gina Jones.
Present.
Representatives of the Compact Partners, and Irene Bevan, UHB.
Yes, I'm here, and I return Assistant Head of Service for Caerphilly locality.
Thank you. Gwent Police. Thank you. The Office of the Gwent Police and Crime Commissioner. Caerphilly Business Forum. Town and Community Council's representative.
Present.
Thank you. And representatives of the voluntary sector. Abertruda Community Church. Barod Cymru. Caerphilly and Gwent. Blaenau Gwent and Caerphilly Care and Repair.
Present.
Caerphilly and Blaenau Gwent Citizens Advice.
Present.
Cruising Gwent. Groundwork Wales.
Present.
Mentor Iaith Sir Caerphilly. Oakdale Community Centre.
Present.
Pobl Housing. Right from the Start. The Parent Network.
Yeah.
The United Reformed Church. The Youth Centre Kevin Hengoed. And Vanguard Caerphilly. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If we could move to the second item then, please, the declarations of interest, and just to remind councillors and officers of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interests in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. And if I can ask you to please use the hands up function to indicate if you have any such declarations during the meeting. Thank you. We can move to item 3, please, then, to receive and consider the minutes of the Voluntary Sector Liaison Committee, which was held on the 2nd of December. And if we can look at each page for accuracy and any matters arising. If we start with page 1, any items to raise there? Councillor Etheridge, I can see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'll wait until I get to the matters arising under item 6, please, Jane.
Okay, thank you. We move to page 2.
Could I raise matter arising there, please, Madam Chair? Minute 3. We were promised an update on the Community Empowerment Fund, and I note it's not on the agenda for this meeting either. Can officers help us?
Vicky, hand up.
Yeah, I deal with the Community Empowerment Fund, so I can help with any queries you may have. I wasn't aware that there was something specifically that'd been requested, but if I can help in any way, I'm more than happy to.
Well, I think on the voluntary side, we just want to know how it's going.
Okay, so we had our second round close on the 18th of February, and the panel met earlier in the week to consider those applications, and I took a report to CMT today, just before this meeting, to outline the applications received in the second round. So those applicants will be informed of the outcome in next couple of weeks. The total that has been allocated from across the 2 rounds in this current year is, I think it's around 98,000 across the whole of the county borough. There are some wards which have or will have fully allocated the allocation, and there are also some wards that haven't made any applications and some that are in between. So it is a real mix of sort of allocations across the county borough. Obviously each ward member has same allocation in terms of a funding pot, and obviously we rely on members to speak to their local communities and the groups that are out there to actually identify projects that might want to come forward. So the underspend in the current year, we did have a late start because obviously we started partway through the year. The underspend in the current year will be ring fenced and carried forward to next year. There will be some slight changes in terms of the allocation due to the election and the reduction in the number of ward members from obviously the May or whenever the election takes place. So obviously all that will be taken into account moving forward.
Thank you, Vicky. Could I bring in Gina as well, who wants to read upon, please?
Vicky, would it be possible to have a list of the areas where you've not had any applications to see if we can help the organisations in those areas in any way, if there's any reason why they're not applying?
Yeah, by all means, I'm more than happy to provide that. As I said, there are some which haven't, had any applications at all. So any support you can provide in terms of identifying, possible projects would be really good. But obviously they have to be signed off by board members. So those obviously discussions have to take place.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vicky.
Can I just ask Vicky how the fund has been promoted amongst the voluntary sector?
So the the sort of marketing of the scheme, if you like, is what we are doing is with members, because the idea of the scheme is to empower groups within the community to bring forward projects, and we feel that members have a really important role to play in this. So it isn't directly communicated to the voluntary sector. It goes through the ward members. There is a page on the council website that has all the information in terms of, you know, what the grant is, what it can be used for, etc. The targeting of the actual scheme itself is done through our ward members, although I think we have asked Garvo to share the information to the wider voluntary sector.
Thank you, Vicky.
Oh,
Yeah, Roger?
sorry. Just to clarify, which committee has received these reports?
The reports don't go to a committee, and they will be reported to Cabinet on an annual basis.
You've got Paul on Councillor Etheridge. Yeah.
If I can turn to Paul Cook, please, your hand is up.
Yeah, so this was on an item 5. I don't know whether we're to complete the comment on this agenda item first or.
Yes, please, thanks, Paul. Judith?
Yes, will the distribution of this money be affected by PERDA in the forthcoming elections? Because shouldn't there actually be a cessation of considerations until after the elections? Because potential candidates going round promising money is not in the spirit of democracy.
Yes, you're quite right, Judith. We have received advice from the council's legal officer that the scheme can't be promoted once we enter PERDA, which is the election period, as I think it's called now, on the 27th of March. However, we can still send applications out to potential applicants, but obviously then the discussions with ward members or the submission won't be able to take place until after the election has taken place. Yes, you are correct.
Thank you, Vicky. If I can come back to you, Paul, I know Councillor Etheridge wanted to raise something on point 6, but Paul, if you wanted to raise something on an item before that, then we'll come to you next.
Okay, thanks. Yes, it was on item 5, mine was around the tree plantings. If you remember, I did a presentation to last committee meeting about the tree planting proposed at Innis Howe Farm, asking for people to get involved. Well, the good news is we had that tree planting event last week, 7th to 11th of March. With volunteers, we planted 3,800 trees, which is really, really good towards our climate change commitments, and a really, really good partnership effort. So thanks to Karen from Garvo and Chris from Groundwork, Joanna from Keep Wells Tidy, and member of my team. That was all went really well. So 3,800 trees planted. I think it'll be a model for what we can do next year. So we're looking to ramp it up and plant even more trees on more sites next year. So I thank you, and an update for the committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. And if I can go back to Councillor Etheridge, if we look at the next page, did you want to raise an item around agenda item 6?
Yeah, I would like to raise about the small grant to the voluntary sector, please. And now you're in Mr. Evans speak from Oakdale, I feel that perhaps we could have a report on the empowerment fund as well regarding the cost and the locations. And I know that Blackwood members have spent all their allocation, but if there's going to be a change in allocation and criteria, I'd like a report on that at the next meeting. But the reason I've asked Madam Chair is in regarding small grants to the voluntary sector, I would like to ask formally that a report is brought next to the next voluntary sector meeting, looking at the criteria, the eligibility and user-friendly forms. I've had representations, and it seems that some people from the voluntary sector, there are delays here, and I would like the report, Vicky, if you can, to encompass what publicity we've done, what awareness we've done, the application process, the amount in the budget and the amount remaining. And also, I would like to ask for, when you do the report, an action plan with timescales and consultation and engagement. I'm sorry, there's a lot there, but this is a formal request, and I believe that, you know, these small grants are essential to the voluntary sector, and we must have these issues in place. In regard to forms, will they be available in paper copy as well as on the internet? Because I understand some of the form is not user friendly, but I do believe that it would be helpful if a report is brought here for discussion. And finally, Chair, I would like to ask the same for the Empowerment Fund. I'd like to know how many ward allocations have not been used and the reasons why. And I'd also like to know what has been used in what locations and what areas, because I believe that each ward in Caerphilly Council should be treated equally. Sorry that there's a lot there, Chair, but I believe these matters are very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. If I could bring Vicky back in there, I can see that your hand is raised. If you could come back in and respond to some of those points, please.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be able, as you say, there is a lot there. So in terms of the community empowerment funds, we have been looking at, obviously, because, you know, we want the money out the door as well. So obviously we will be targeting those wards that haven't had the funding or haven't used the funding. There will be changes due to the election, because obviously the number of members is reducing. So what that effectively means is the pot of funding will stay the same, but each ward member will have slightly more, because obviously there's less members for to go around. There's also funding spent in the current year, funding unspent in the current year that will also be carried forward to next year. So there will potentially be quite a large pot of funding per member next year. Obviously, those areas that have spent all their funding, like Blackwood, as Councillor Etheridge just said, they won't have any additional funding because, you know, they've already spent their award this year. In terms of the small grants, we, as requested at the last meeting, I believe, we met with Alison to discuss the concerns of the voluntary sector. So that meeting has taken place. We went through all the suggestions that have been made previously. We got back to 2019. And I think, Alison, I don't know if you want to say anything, but I think what we eventually came to was that it was more about the understanding of the reasons why things like they are that was missing. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Alison.
Yeah, I can do. I was invited to a meeting just after our special liaison committee meeting around the budget. We did discuss the report that the voluntary sector reps had prepared and some of the issues that were raised. And as a result of that, it was agreed that the grant would be put onto the council's website so that the information about that grant would be available on the website, so it would be more visible. We did not necessarily resolve all of the issues that the third sector would like to see with it, but obviously we have a better understanding, and it was agreed at that meeting that once the diaries were a little less chocker with the well-being assessment, that Cat Peters, as the manager of the policy unit, would come and meet with the voluntary sector reps separately to discuss some of the issues around grants and how we can support the promotion of the grant schemes. But she would come and meet with the representatives committee for further discussions. That date isn't arranged yet because it was all about timing at the time. So we're looking forward to actually having that physical in-person meeting with the voluntary sector reps to discuss it further.
Thank you, Alison. So there may well be some more feedback following that meeting that we can bring back as well to this full meeting. In terms of a report next time around some of those issues that Councillor Etheridge raised, is that possible, Vicky, to clarify some of the points?
Chair, can I make just a few more points in relation to the points that were raised? So the criteria for the small grants is set by the Grants to Voluntary Sector Panel, which is a formal committee of the local authority. They review the criteria on an annual basis. So following the election, that criteria will be considered again. I know that suggestions have been made in the past about reducing the categories, for example. The Grants to Voluntary Sector Panel did consider that suggestion, but they wanted to leave the criteria as it was. So they have considered it, and that is their choice to make because they are the committee responsible for these grants. However, as I said, following the election, there will be discussions around the criteria, and it's something that we can raise again. But ultimately, that's their decision as a council committee. What else can I think? So we are currently, or we will be making some changes to the website for both the Welsh Church Fund and the Community Empowerment Fund. There will be some changes around leases that have to be incorporated into the form and the guidance and everything else. The guidance will be made available on the website with an invitation for potential applicants to discuss projects with us, and then we can send an application form once we are happy that they're going to meet the criteria, because what we don't want is organisations to go to a lot of effort putting an application form together and only to find that it's not an eligible project. So we are trying to do as much as we can in terms of making it more straightforward. I'm tweaking the forms at the moment to try and overcome some of the issues. Content of the forms is going to remain the same because we only collect the information that we need to collect for the purposes of assessing and managing the grant. But we are trying our best to take on board, the concerns that are out there. Was there anything else that Councillor Etheridge feels I haven't covered?
Did you want to come back in there, Councillor Etheridge, before you?
Yes, please. I've made a formal request for a report to come to the next voluntary sector committee. I would like that request considered, and if we've got to take a vote, I'm happy to take a vote if somebody will second my proposal, and the same with the Empowerment Fund. I believe it should come here. I've just been informed by a fellow councillor that the cabinet member sent out an email yesterday to councillors in regard the Empowerment Fund, which I haven't read yet. Now, I believe things like that need to come to the voluntary sector as well. I'm sorry, Chair, but consultation engagement is essential between the voluntary sector, all elected members and officers. And as I said, I would like my formal request, please considered, because what I don't want to do, and I may not be successful on May the 5th, is table a notice to motion to full council asking for these reports, because I think it's far better to ask you at the Voluntary Sector Liaison Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I just respond and say that's something that you mentioned, that the meeting that Alison mentioned with Kath Peters, that's definitely something that can be discussed in that meeting. And then obviously if felt appropriate, we can definitely bring reports back to a future meeting.
Thank you, Vicky. And yeah, a suggestion also that those discussions and reports could inform the review then that the panel will be conducting around the small grant scheme as well. So yeah, if we're happy then that is discussed during that meeting, so that reports can be brought to the next meeting. Okay, I'm conscious that Councillor Fussell has had his hand up for some time. So can I ask you, Councillor Fussell, to come in at this point?
Yeah, thank you. It's all to do with the Empowerment Fund. I'm probably one of those applicants that was not successful. I think some of the questions that were asked by Councillor Etheridge are reflective, and the answers given by Alison Doyle were items to be weighted. In the same vein, we don't know if we're going to be councillors after May, so it'll be an interesting one. But I did put an application in, which was not successful, as Vicky, sorry, was aware, and should declare interest, perhaps. The questions were simply about the fact how is this, what changes, if any, would apply to this formal application, but Vicky's answered that, so that's fine. I'll defer. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fussell. So several issues being raised, and hopefully they can be discussed in the meeting with Kath Peters and then highlighted in a report during our next full meeting. Okay. If we can move on to the last page then of those minutes, and unless there's any issues, quite a brief paragraph on that last page. Could I ask the minutes to be moved and seconded, please?
I'll move then.
Thank you, Roger. And could somebody raise a hand to second those minutes, please? Thank you, Councillor Aldworth. Okay. If we could move on to item 4.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you take a vote on the minutes, please?
Sorry. Could everybody raise their hand just to agree with the minutes, please?
They're approved. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if we could move on to item 4, which is to receive and consider the minutes of the special meeting of the Voluntary Sector Liaison Committee, which was held on the 27th of January. And again, if we can check for accuracy and any matters arising. So we can turn to page 5 in the pack, the first page of those minutes. Any issues arising there? No. If we move on to page 6. Any matters arising or matters in terms of accuracy? No, and on to the last page of those minutes, which is page 7 in the pack. No. Okay. Could I ask somebody to move those minutes then, please, and then somebody to second them?
Move the minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Aldworth. And if somebody could raise a hand to second them. Anyone?
Yeah,
Thank you, Simon. And if we could lastly take a vote with a show of hands so we can confirm those minutes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. If we can move along now then to item 5, which is the wellbeing assessment update, and if I can hand over to Paul Cook, the Senior Policy Officer, to present that update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as a committee now, on the last meeting on the 2nd December, I presented an update, and I told the committee that the draft wellbeing assessment was going to the Public Services Board on the 7th of December for approval to go to consultation. So at their meeting, the PSB did indeed approve the draft wellbeing assessment to go for consultation. That consultation period lasted from the 13th of December to the 31st of January. And we did have quite a few responses. So thank you to members of this committee who know responded, and everybody else. So all those responses came back in to us. As you know, Caerphilly Council, my team, are coordinating the wellbeing assessment on behalf of Gwent. So all those consultation comments came back in centrally. The ones which were to do with specific topics, so the environment or health, went to the authors for those chapters, and they made amendments or considered them to make amendments. Anything to do with formatting and making conclusions and cross-cutting themes came to my team, and we made those amendments. So all those amendments were then done, and the revised document, the revised wellbeing assessment, went to the Public Services Board last week, and the Public Services Board formally approved that wellbeing assessment last week. So the assessment is now complete. That was then sent to the statutory consultees. We have to send it to the Welsh Ministers, Auditor General for Wales, Future Generations Commission, and the scrutiny committees for the councils. So that has been done, and it's now gone for translation, and will be published by the 5th of May, which is what is set out in the legal requirements. So that's the good news, that the wellbeing assessment is done and completed on time, which is great. So it was, as the committee will know, a very, very big piece of work, complicated by being the first time it's being done across Gwent. So big thanks to everybody who's involved in getting that across the line and getting that done. Would be quite nice to take a bit of a break, because that was a huge piece of work. But the wellbeing assessment is only one part of in a step in the process, which is towards developing the wellbeing plan. And the statutory deadlines remain quite challenging on this. So the next stage, which is we're just starting to undertake now, is it's called the response analysis. So the assessment sets out the state of wellbeing across Gwent, and then we'd have to look in more detail at certain aspects. So the legislation or the guidance describes the response analysis as the bridge to the wellbeing plan. So this is the part of the process whereby you look at the issues around wellbeing raised in the wellbeing assessment and look into those in more detail, and consider them, what the implications are of those. So the wellbeing assessment identified around 120 wellbeing issues across Gwent, which the PSB reviewed, had a way day looking at that, and then through a scoring mechanism, officers from all PSB partner organisations provided scoring. I probably won't go into all the detail of how that worked, but essentially, at this meeting, at the PSB meeting last week, the PSB agreed on 3 areas for response analysis. So 3 areas that they're looking at more detail to consider, and those were the environment. So looking at the climate and nature emergencies, health and well-being, particularly focusing on health inequalities, and community cohesion. So that covered community safety and substance misuse. And at his meeting last week, the PSB also organised and agreed which organisations would lead on the response analysis. So the lead organisations would take responsibility for making sure each of those areas looked at in detail, that the relevant people were consulted on. So you will get consulted on that process, and they're properly resourced to do that work. With the response analysis needed to be completed by the 30th of June. So for the environment, Steve Morgan from Natural Resources Wales will take the lead to that. For health, Sarah Aitkenett and Aaron Bevan, Health Board, will lead on that with support from Howard Toplis from Tycallan, because housing has been decided to come under that health element. With community cohesion, it's Pam Kelly from the police, Jeff Cuthbert, Police and Crime Commissioner, and Steve Tiley from Garvo, looking at those areas. So that was agreed last week. I've sent out emails to each of those leads now to set up meetings to discuss how that will work and how we formally do that, and how my team supports in the process to make sure that those are done. There's a standard template, so each of the response analysis will be done in the same way, covering the same topic areas, so that when they come back to the PSB on the 13th of June, they can compare like with like, they can understand the issues set out. So the response analysis will look at what the issue is, how tackling it can contribute to wellbeing in Gwent, where we are now, so what's the data and things telling us, what is currently being done, what else could be done, and then it makes recommendations on resources and what the next steps would be. So for each of those three areas, those reports will come back to the Public Services Board on the 30th of June. So within that process, there will be a chance to consult and input into what you believe should be the key elements within each of those. And so Steve Tiley is jointly leading on the community cohesion one. So we've obviously got a very good route into this process immediately through that. Then at its meeting on the 30th of June, the PSB will consider each of those response analysis. And I've mentioned how tight the timescales on this. At that meeting on the 30th of June, the PSB will also decide on its draft objectives. So it'll identify the key objectives it feels could be put forward for consultation. They will then go for consultation, and the draft wellbeing plan would then need to be agreed on the 29th of September. So, as I say, quite challenging timescales, but also within that process, quite a lot of opportunities to consult and be involved and put forward your ideas on how we do this. I suppose the other thing to point out is that the existing wellbeing plan is still going on, so we are still delivering as a local delivery group on our existing commitments under the wellbeing plan. When this one the new plan is formally signed off, which should be on the 5th of May next year, so May 2023, that will then take over from the current plan, and the current plan will then be subsumed within the new one. That's probably what I was going to say in terms of an update, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Are you happy to take some questions around the update now?
Happy to take whatever questions. I'll do my best.
If I turn to Councillor
You're on mute.
Terribly sorry about that. Having difficulty getting the cursor from one screen to another. I can hear my voice coming back, bouncing a bit. Can you hear me clearly?
The phones are off now, please. Thank you.
Sorry.
Try again, Liz.
Yeah.
Right, and thank you very much, Paul, for the update. Something that I've just looking quickly at the plan and how things are scheduled. It's all very well written, excellent. But I wonder what it may be on the PSB with regard to the Ukrainian issue and just taking in refugees. Is that going to impact on the key objectives of the plan and the report that you plan to agree in September? In between all this has happened, is it going to impact on your report, your final report for this year, please?
Okay, yeah, so thank you. So the wellbeing plan, wellbeing assessment process is quite well set out in terms of legislation. It's a long-term process lasting over 5 years, but the Ukrainian situation has kind of sprung upon us at very short notice. So clearly it's not been identified in the wellbeing assessment because it's happened after the wellbeing assessment process took place. But we will, through the process, be allowed to look at it in terms of how it impacts on the objectives going forward. So it may well be picked up under health and community cohesion and those type of topics. So that will be down to the leads to do. But I at the PSB meeting, there was a separate element item on the agenda around the Ukrainian situation. So it certainly will be dealt with. I think it's unclear as to whether it can be dealt as part of the wellbeing plan, but it's certainly being dealt with by Public Service Board partners across Gwent at probably a quicker rate than the legislation covering the wellbeing assessment takes account of. So I suppose in conclusion, yes, it will be looked at whether it is formally part of the wellbeing plan or whether it's done as a separate sort of collaboration between Public Service Board organisations is not really clear until we know what the ask is yet of local authorities and other partners.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you both. Stephen Tyree, I can see you've got your hand up, about to come in now.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, it was just to kind of thank Paul for all the work that he's put into this and given the presentation this morning. And I think it's just to sort of reiterate to the voluntary sector really is that you know, it's important for us now to ensure that as we moving forward through the Gwent PSB part and we consider where we are still with our current wellbeing plan. I mean, the next stage is now, isn't it, is that as the start to as the key priorities start to come out of the Gwent PSB stuff, there's still a locality area and actions that we need to sort of consider now as we moving into this Gwent PSB time. So it's just, you know, the support of the voluntary sector to be able to get involved in the key aspects that affect our locality. That's part of the next step, really. So it's just sort of making sure that we can get your support in helping sort of progress that work.
Thanks, Stephen. Any other issues that anyone would like to raise around the update around the wellbeing assessment and plan? Alison?
Can I just ask what the sort of timescale is for the next opportunity for community consultation might be? Because I mean, obviously the assessment work was done largely online due to the restrictions around the pandemic and stuff like that, and I don't know whether that impacted on the numbers and the responses that you got, because the previous wellbeing plan we did an awful lot of face-to-face consultation and work, and I just wondered what the opportunities will be and whether the intention is that there will be, as restrictions lift, whether there will be face-to-face opportunities going forward.
Should I come back on the chair?
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Okay, so effectively there'll be at least another 2 opportunities for community and other people involvement. So the next one would be during the response analysis stage. So while the leads are looking at those 3 areas, so looking at the environment, health and community cohesion, the leads organisations for those will need to consult with both professionals and with the public on that. So that would be down to them to sort out and organise how that would work. Certainly I'd hope that it would be done, well, certainly with the public. I suppose now that the restrictions around COVID have been lifted, there's a much better chance we can do it face to face, which would be good. But the main chance to get involved would be when the plan is drafted. So when the priorities have been identified and we're starting to flesh those out, then that would be part of the consultation period. There's I think it's a 12-week consultation period which we would need to go through once the plan is drafted, so after September. There are also sort of statutory consultation periods within that we have to consult with as well. So at least 2 formal opportunities for the public and probably more for this committee to get involved in during that process.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. There has been some queries amongst the voluntary sector around the data, particularly around deprivation data, and in view of the fact that it's a Gwent-wide assessment, and possibly some concerns around perhaps the data skewed then in terms of that deprivation data, well, considering the differences between some of the counties within Gwent. Is there any clarification around that in terms of ensuring or reassurance really that you know, it is possible to see clearly that data for each individual county.
I pick up on that, Paul.
Yeah, yeah. Very
So
disputed.
the deprivation data is published at a very small geographical level, which is Lower Proudfoot area. It wasn't appropriate to include that level of detail in the overall Gwent assessment. However, as you will be aware, there are a series of 5 local wellbeing assessments within Caerphilly, which cover Upper Rumney Valley, Mid Valleys East, Mid Valleys West, Caerphilly Basin and Lower Isloin. And all of the relevant deprivation data has been included in those documents, those reports. The local wellbeing assessments do form part of the main assessment. They are a sort of subsection within it. So it is in the Gwent assessment, but it's a section within it, if that makes sense. And as I said, we have that level of detail for those 5 areas within Caerphilly County Borough, similar to obviously the other areas within Gwent. So it is in there, but it's in a slightly separate, different section within the overall report.
Right, thanks, Vicky. Any other questions or queries before we move on? No, and if I can just thank Paul again for the update, and yeah, as a sector, you know, we look forward to opportunities over the coming months now to contribute to the next stage and to have an input into the final plan as well. But many thanks for the update this morning, and also to Vicky for the clarifications as well. If we can move on then to item number 6 next, which is the community building survey update. And if I can hand over to Kevin Dawson from Garvo to give us that update.
Okay, we've got very preliminary data so far. We've had 11 respondents back. If this doesn't increase over the next couple of weeks, we look at doing something a little bit more targeted regarding numbers. But the data is still quite interesting as a snapshot, nevertheless. So when we asked, does your building have community building have disabled access? 9 out of 11 respondents said yes, they did, and only 1 said no, which was quite interesting. And another one said some, so I'm not quite sure what that means, but that's pretty good going, really. When you consider that the mix of buildings we had were, I think there was 3 churches and a rugby club, and the rest being community centres so far. So that's quite interesting. What facilities does your building provide? Most said tables and chairs, obviously. Some had storage, 4 had a stage. 2 of those had a stage and stage lighting. 3 had a sound system. 4 had a multimedia projection and screen. 5 had Wi-Fi, which is pretty good. And 2 had IT facilities. 1 had a licensed bar. I'll probably be going there. And 6 had other kinds of facilities as well. Does your building have a kitchen available for users? 10 out of the 11 said yes, they did. Are there disabled toilet facilities in your community building? 9 out of 11 said they were. What kind of car parking facilities? This is interesting because only 2 are on-site parking. All the rest were pretty much on the street, and 1 at a council car park nearby. So that's quite interesting there. Do you have any unused rooms in the building that may be permanently and exclusively rented by other voluntary organisations? Now this was very interesting because 9 said no and 1 said yes, and 1 other said possibly. Which is interesting, has interesting implications for income generation. When obviously if they don't have a room they can rent permanently, then they rely on ad hoc rentals of the normal space. Are all relevant fire, health and safety, water, air conditioning, electrical and other tests carried out on a regular basis? And you will all be pleased to know that only 11 said yes. What else do you need to make your community building successful? By far, the largest number said listing in some kind of local community directory would be very useful. And 5 said promotion and advertising in general. So they were by far the most popular responses there. And that's what we have up to now. In the future, when we get more data, I'd like to do a full presentation on that as well with all the data is relevant.
Thank you, Kevin. If I could just bring Alison in as well at this point.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of context to this, the voluntary sector representatives have been looking at this and started looking at a community building survey pre-pandemic, when the local authorities started looking at the community hub model for providing services in localities. And what we wanted to investigate and demonstrate is that there are opportunities for services to be provided out of community buildings in the same way as there might be opportunities out of statutory sector-owned buildings. And it was also to look at how third sector organisations with buildings could collaborate together and actually support their sustainability through potential rental of rooms to other organisations. So this is the starting point really for this community building survey with those buildings we've identified so far. But the survey will actually be circulated to local members as well, because we would like the help of local members. So it was an opportunity for us to ask for that help. It's gone to local members, but it is about asking local members, because of their local knowledge, to encourage organisations across Caerphilly Borough that have buildings to actually complete the survey for us, so that we get that bigger picture, because it's an opportunity for the third sector to promote its buildings, to promote the activities that go on there. And interestingly, from what Kevin was saying, is that quite a few of those organisations are keen to be in a directory. So, you know, that may be the potential that we will look at. But it is also the opportunity for us to be able to promote those organisations when partnership activities come up, and we are looking for local venues for those activities to take place.
Thanks, Alison. Are there any questions or queries around this piece of work before we move on? No? Okay, if I can thank Kevin again for all the work on this, and we look forward to hearing the full results when there are more responses in, so we all have a clear picture of the situation in the borough. Okay. Okay, if we can move on to item 7 now, and if I could welcome Natasha Jones in her new role as Funding and Partnership Manager with Gwent Police. And Natasha is going to give us a presentation outlining her role and also any opportunities for organisations within Caerphilly Borough to link in with her and work in partnership with Gwent Police. Thank you, Natasha.
That's okay. No, thank you. Oh, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning, and thank you very much for coming to me along today. Oh, so I think I can hear a bit of feedback. So can you hear yourself a little bit? Oh, okay, I'll try and work through that. Okay, so as just mentioned, I'm the partnership funding manager. I started with Gwent Police back in August. So I still kind of class myself as relatively new, and I work right across Gwent. So my role is to optimise on the opportunities available to Gwent Police to generate extra resources. So be it, you know, staff, income, for example. And the purpose, you know, the reasons why we do that, you know, it's to support the delivery of the police and crime plan, to support frontline policing, to target local issues in the communities, to maximise our budgets, funding positive action, you know, which makes Gwent safer, and to support innovation, sustainability, and improve service delivery. So we do that through a number of ways. That's through collaboration and partnerships. So, you know, so working with other organisations, especially the third sector, you know, the voluntary sector. For me, that's something that I feel that we really need to strengthen. Through sponsorship, so we can offer sponsorship opportunities to organisations. For example, somebody might want to sponsor our staff awards for some kind of perceived benefit, through donations, as well as through charges and fees. So for example, when we police a football match inside the grounds, we charge for that. When we send officers to a different force to support on protests and policing protests, we charge what's called mutual aid for that. So there's lots of ways that we can create extra resources into Gwent Police. So ultimately, you know, what I'm here for today is just to kind of to let you know that that I'm here. We're really keen to work in partnerships with yourselves, because from an external funding point of view, opportunities for statutory services, as many will know, are very, very small. So for example, we have funding that comes from the Home Office that we can apply for. Many of you have probably heard of Safer Streets. So Rumney up in Caerphilly was successful, I think, in round 2 of Safer Streets funding. So Safer Streets round 4 has just been announced, so we're currently looking at that, as well as some opportunities, you know, for funding from the Welsh Assembly and Welsh Government and like Ministry of Justice, for example. However, for organisations in the third sector, there's lots more opportunities, because you're not-for-profit organisations. You have a whole range of opportunities available to you to draw down funding. So for us, it is really important that we are linking in with the grassroots organisations, and we are there as a partner to be part of any funding bids that would help us in, you know, making Gwent a safer place to live and work. So really, it's just, you know, to keep that in the back of your minds, that if there are any opportunities that you're looking at, and it has a community safety element, you know, looking at youth work, diversionary activities, you know, anything really, the more innovative, the better. Please, you know, bear me in mind and get in touch. And, you know, we're here and we're really keen to work with you. Obviously, you know, when we're looking at these grant opportunities, everything has to be led by evidence. And again, you know, working with yourselves to pull that information together. And again, we have lots of information and lots of data here within Gwent Police. We can help to strengthen application forms, as well as offer match funding as well. So by providing officers to support in delivery, you can put that in applications as match funding. Again, further strengthening any applications that you're putting forward. And my role is to support on the grant application itself as well. Obviously, I know you have Gavo, again, an amazing organisation, and have specific officers to support in pulling grant applications together. So I'm a bit of Gwent Police's equivalent, really, of that. So yeah, so I won't keep rabbiting on, but if you've got any questions, I'll push it out to yourselves now, really. No, all quite. Oh, couple of hands. Yeah.
Thanks, Natasha, and that was really useful. And I'm sure there's quite a few questions in terms of opportunities to link in with you. Councillor Etheridge was first, I think.
Thank you, Natasha, for a very informative presentation. I'd like to ask the funding which the Crime Commission have got, and I'll just give you one example. I spoke to a chairman of the Taxi Association in Caerphilly this week, and they said that they'd approached the Crime Commissioner's office because there's they took over the toilets in Blackwood Bus Station, and there's problems with antisocial behaviour for a funding for roller shutter doors, and they were told that the Crime Commissioner may contribute at a maximum £100. So the Taxi Association guy said, "Thank you very much, goodbye." So I think we need to know what funding is available to the voluntary sector and other agencies from the Crime Commissioner, and is there a sort of policy and criteria? Because I think, you know, any funding which is available, the voluntary sector, you know, may wish to tap into it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I work for Gwent Police, so I'm the other side of the coin from the Police Crime Commissioner. However, I do know if you look on their website and for the funding tab, the information is on there for the two strands of funding they have. One is the police community fund, so that's the big pot of money. I think that's up to, I'm gonna say it's like £50,000. Is it a 2-3 year project? So that's a big meaty application form. You know, they're looking for, you know, fully costed projects, sustainability. However, that post at the minute, right, for the financial year, that round should be opening. So please keep an eye out for that. The other funding they have, which is the smaller one, is called Positive Impact Fund. I'm not sure of the criteria for that. All I know is that it has to have a positive impact in the community. That one is up to £1,000. I know they like applications for around £500-600, and that's just an email to the Commissioner's office, and again that is on the Commissioner's website. But in terms of that, I wouldn't know much else really about the Commissioner's funding.
Thank you, Natasha. Judith, did you have your hand up? I know it's disappeared now, but did you want to come in and ask a question?
It was the same question as Councillor Etheridge about the Crime and Commissioners Fund.
Okay, thank you, Judith.
So on the back of that, though, just to let you know, when those local policing teams, so they have a pot of money also called the Positive Impact Fund. So that they've got a maximum grant for the year of £10,000, one for the east, one for the west. And if you link in with your CSOs, you can put applications for up to £1,000 to help deliver projects which have to meet the priorities of the crime plan. So that's about the neighbourhood safe, confidence in policing, reducing crime. It does have to hit some of those priorities, but the little application form, you can work with the local policing team, the community support officers, get that completed. That then needs to go to the inspector. If they agree, you sign it off, then it goes to the chief inspector who then gives final approval. So if you want more information on that, please get in touch with me separately, and we can have a chat through your project and make sure that we can make it fit. And if you need to put you in touch with any of the local CFOs, I can assist you with that as well. I can drop my email address in the chat box.
That would be great. Thanks, Natasha. Any other questions? I can see Councillor Etheridge's hand is still up. Is that from the previous question or a new question?
No, it's from the previous question. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. Any other queries before we move on? No. Okay. Many thanks, Natasha. That was really useful and useful in terms of the Crime Commissioners funding streams as well. So in terms of those more local projects where we need to link with community safety officers, the best thing is to get in touch with you initially, is then discuss any projects, and then you're able to link organisations to those community safety officers.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, that's great. Many thanks, Natasha, for your time this morning.
Okay, no thanks. Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, if we can move on then to the last item, which is items of interest concerning the voluntary sector from any compact partners. So if I could ask if there are any topics or issues that anybody would like to raise.
I was representing Health was just left.
Right, okay. So I think Eira unfortunately has had to leave, who was representing the Health Board. Any other representatives that wanted to raise any questions or issues? No, I can't see any hands at the moment. No. Okay, if I can thank you all for your attendance and contributions this morning. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. and bring the meeting to a close. And we look forward to seeing you at the next full meeting. And if I can ask the clerk to stop the recording.